Hi, this is Steve Jackson, and we have a very special guest today at the Park Theater. And he is playwright Joe Landry. And Joe wrote the play that we are presenting next week. And there's what a great play, and what it's based on is a classic. It's a Wonderful Life, a live radio play. Welcome, Joe.
Thanks very much, Steve. It's great to be here. Thank you.
And we're presenting it on live a week from tonight, and then we'll have encores on Christmas Eve, the perfect night, because that's when this radio broadcast that Joe devised. And first, before we get into the play, your version of this classic story, I'd love, Joe, for you to kind of just tell you, what was your relationship with It's a Wonderful Life as a film, and how you thought to come to this as a project you'd write a play about.
Sure, I'm happy to share that. I first saw It's a Wonderful Life when I was a teenager. And it was sort of before it was on TV as much as it was. I don't know if you may remember that for a while it was on a number of channels. It seemed like almost constantly between Thanksgiving and the end of the year. And so this was a little before that happened. And I was working at the film department at the public library in my hometown in Fairfield, Connecticut. And It's a Wonderful Life was one of the films they had. So I was kind of working my way through their collection of films and came across It's a Wonderful Life, really didn't know much about it. And from the first time I saw it, it felt unlike so many other classic films I'd seen from that period. It really just had a resonance that has stayed with me through all the years. And I feel like that's something that a lot of fans of the film can relate to, as far as that it's a piece that really connects, and although it is considered a holiday film, it's a message that's great to hear at least once a year about how each of our lives touches so many others, and all of that, and not to belittle it, but that message. So I grew up with classic film. This was actually before TCM, and I started writing when I was in high school, and started writing for the stage. And I had a dear friend of mine who was the drama director at the local high school, and she was looking for an adaptation of It's a Wonderful Life, and there wasn't one that existed at that point. So she asked if I would write one for her. So I did that. The first year it was done, it was with a typical high school cast. So probably 25 or so, and that version, which was different than the radio, it wasn't a radio play at that point. It was.
And what year was it at that when your first script?
91. Yeah,
which year?
1991.
1991.
Yeah, so I was 20 then. Can do math, I guess. But yeah, so the full stage version was done a couple of times, and then it was readapted in, like, I believe it was like 1996 as the radio play. That was by the time I'd started my own theater company here in Connecticut, and that was one of the plays that we did there. And it started, it was done there year after year, and started to slowly move across the country. Different people would hear about it, and it was published a few years ago, and it's really taken off, which I've been so grateful for the opportunity.
And how many times do you know the number? How many times it has been produced?
Oh gosh.
I mean, or even a given year, I've got to believe it's dozens.
Yeah, I mean, since it's been published, because I don't know if I have many of those figures before it was published, but since it's been published, it's averaged about 100 productions a year. And yeah, the number was quite staggering. Actually, I might have access to that number, but anyway, it was.
No, I'm sure it's got to be one of the. And I mean, there are other adaptations, but I think the novelty and the creative brilliance of taking this to a live radio play is very comfortable also for a lot of theater companies, whether they're professional all the way down to community level or even school level. So I think that, but it just seems right, and it absolutely is perfect, because I know I listen to a lot of old time radio shows, and there's nothing unusual about this, because many times films during especially the 40s and 50s, adaptations of films by the actors that were in the films usually were done on radio.
Yes, that was something I didn't learn until, I mean, over the past 10 or 12 years, I guess. I didn't know that when I first,
Well,
I didn't know much about that.
you were in sync because you know, no one would think, you know, from that, if you lived in that period of time, you would have said, well, I mean, I listened to, I don't know if it was Citizen Kane, they did a version on air. I think they did. But there's so many of these great films you would never think they would do something like this to, but I guess the studios thought it was marketing.
Right.
And, you know, and they usually, you know, they cut it down to like a 1 hour version of whatever it was. But yeah, they did it. And now the story behind, do you know much about this, the original story, the greatest gift?
Only a little bit. I don't know that too well. I mean, one of the first books that I had was the It's a Wonderful Life book by Jeannie Basinger. And that book has the screenplay in it and also had the short story in it. The short story is quite different than the film. I don't know if you know the story or not.
I have. I mean, the names were changed in some elements, and it was a short story written, I believe, by a New Englander. I also believe, I forget his name right now, but I think it was 1944 or 43. It was written. And I know it was. He couldn't get it published, but eventually Good Housekeeping picked it up, and that's when the studios found it.
Yeah, there's also about him sending out as a Christmas card as well.
Yes, yes.
I think that's also what got some attention.
And it's got a New England feel to it, certainly. You know, so for any, well, you're Fairfield, Connecticut, and up here in New Hampshire. I mean, but again, it's so universal. I would also assume it's so universal. I mean, it's American universal, but I would assume that you've had productions outside the United States of your play.
I have, yes. It has been produced all over the world at this point, which has been pretty amazing. I've not seen it outside the U.S. personally myself, but
yeah,
I have seen
that's great
productions in the United States over the years.
Yeah. Well, I mean, if you had to summarize what, you know, the real message is from your standpoint, you've dissected this story many, many times to write it and certainly to reread it. And what do you really think is the message and plus the main themes that come through on it?
Well, I think it's probably a couple of the classic lines from it of you know, not only there's, you know, no man is a failure who has friends, which is at the end, which I think that line definitely touches a lot of people. But there's the line like it's Clarence's line of one man touches so many others. What a hole he leaves. I should know this line by heart, right? It's strange, isn't it? One man's life touches so many others, and when he isn't around, he leaves a pretty big hole, doesn't he? That I think the impact that we have on those around us constantly, I think that we don't realize that sometimes. And I think that George is a very selfless character who puts himself, you know, puts everyone before himself all the time. And when he finally is at the end of his rope and needs help through that divine intervention, and I'm assuming everyone knows what the story is and there aren't any spoilers here, but through that, he's able to see his life in a different way and be able to, you know, embrace his life, whatever it may be. And, you know, so I think that those are the messages that stick with me and with a lot of people who
and is that why you think, I mean, why has it the test of time? You know, there are a few, there's a handful of classic films and stories that go with Christmas. We're presenting another one that's done by, that was produced at the Geffen Playhouse, is Christmas Carol. You might have heard they're streaming a version of that they produced during COVID, and we're presenting that one. That one is a presentation of something, a film produced, but not an original production that we're doing of your play. But what do you think, like A Christmas Carol and well, The Grinch Stole Christmas and Miracle on 34th Street and certainly It's a Wonderful Life. What do you think, you know, why do those they endure and they endear so much?
Well, I think they become part of the American lexicon, mostly basically over the past number of decades through television and through the availability of them. I mean, back in the days of film, even before television, films would get re-released, and that still did happen after the advent of television. But I do think that with everyone having the access to TV and being able to see these classic films, and then also being able to own them on physical media, which I imagine at some point a lot of people did. And there was this period back in the 70s when It's a Wonderful Life was available on VHS, not the 70s. Actually, there was the copyright status changed in the 70s, and after that happened, it was shown on TV pretty much constantly. And then with the advent of DVD, as a VHS, DVD, with VHS, it was available pretty much everywhere. So I think a lot of people had
$2.99 a VHS or something.
Yeah,
Everybody could see it.
I think just having access to it, everyone having it so accessible. And I think it's a film that's carried down generation to generation, that parents are showing it to children, and now their children are showing it to their children. And I mean, I don't see it as an old film. I see it as a very timeless and very contemporary as well. I think that I mean, I've been a fan of classic film since I was young. No, I know not everyone is. I know there was we need to make it colorized now because people don't want to watch black and white. But I feel like the film is very modern, and it's also not as sentimental as I think people think it is. I think it has some very dark moments in it, and some very real human moments in it that I think they don't remember those right off the bat, but it definitely packs the punch.
I'm assuming that you are a fan exclusively of the Capra Jimmy Stewart Donna Reed version.
Yes. I mean, I guess so. What other versions are you referring to? Are you referring to the
well, I'm just the original version, film version, or I know they've made maybe a couple of others over time.
Yeah, I mean, there was the TV remake where they did some gender swapping in this, I think that was the 70s, where became Marlo Thomas, and they sort of switched the genders of George, and then that was when where Orson Welles was Potter, but then like Cloris Leachman was Clara. I think they changed Clarence to a woman. So that version, I think maybe I saw once, but.
Well, I'll tell you, we are so proud to present your version, and we're presenting it because it fits with our times. Technically fits with our times. Because it's a radio play, it makes it very easy for us to remotely produce. Well, I don't know. We'll see how easy it is when we do it live. But to use the technology like we're using right now, to be able to have we are doing it with 7 actors, including the stage manager, plus a sound effects person. And so that's how and you have recommendations of how to distribute the roles in your script. But but with COVID, that it really, because it's a radio play, makes it a lot easier to produce this.
It's been, I mean, the hybrid nature of the piece in general is something that I feel has always been something very attractive about it. Not only, as you were saying before, with how for a producer that it's potentially it's a smaller way to do a bigger story.
Yeah.
Boiling it down to a handful of actors instead of doing it with a cast of 20 or that sort of thing. And then when you add the additional layer of it being a radio play, that gets me excited about having, it's sort of like, here's a recipe of how to do this, and you're going to put this recipe together, and you're going to put it on whatever plate you want, and garnish it however you want, and set the table however you want. That there are lots of different ways that you can do it.
Yeah.
And I've tons of different versions over the years with different number of actors and different concepts on that. And this year specifically, I think with a lot of the productions going online, that there's a whole additional layer of like, okay, how do we tell a story that is that was a film that was turned into a play that's based on a radio play, but now we're doing online. So it's sort of like, but I feel like it works pretty well, because I think the beauty of the radio play aspect of it is that the story does work only as audio. And because there are different productions who only done an audio version and have not done
Yeah.
it on, but I think it's very flexible for these times, and I think it's been cool to be able to revisit it with different production companies like your own this year.
Great. Well, now, obviously, Joe, you're a playwright. So this is not the only piece that you've done in your career. And as I've seen, you've done many, many plays. What's the most recent one that we should be on the lookout for?
My adaptation of The Great Gatsby is going to be published early next year. And that's also being done as a radio play, kind of following on the radio play brand.
Yeah.
I also have a new an audio serial that's going to air next year, and that's a commission through University of Detroit, Michigan, Detroit Mercy. And I imagine that will have a life after that. And that's also somewhat film inspired. It's inspired by fans of Alfred Hitchcock films. So it's not based on Alfred Hitchcock, but it's like a story, this adventure story of these people who are obsessed with Alfred Hitchcock.
Wonderful.
So, yeah.
Well, our theater was to open. We have a new performing arts center here, and with 2 stages, and was going to open this past summer, and we're pretty much finished with our construction, but it's going to hold. But I certainly would love to invite you up sometime as either a visiting playwright for readings, or hopefully maybe we'll take on a production someday.
That would be wonderful. I would love that opportunity.
Yeah.
Thank you so much. I look forward
Well, again, Joe, I thank you so much for being with us today at the Park Theater. We look forward to producing your play next week. The rehearsals are happening now. People are excited, and it's going to be fun.
Great. Well, thank you. It's been such a pleasure to speak with you, and I look forward to checking out your production online also.
Absolutely. Be a kind critic. No, we've got wonderful actors, some of which you probably know, the Peterborough Players that have played there, and my wife, who is an actress in New York, but also at Peterborough Players, she's going to be directing it this time, Lisa Bosner. And so, yeah, it's going to be a fun group.
Well, lovely.
All right. Well, happy holidays to you, Joe, and we'll be seeing you very soon.
Thank you very much. Happy holidays to you as well.